Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. My name is Jim, and this episode is going to focus on three things. We're going to talk about what an interactive mock draft simulator is. We want to talk about top 50 players in the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft, and we want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals. So, the interactive mock draft simulator means that the player boards move. Player boards change based upon fans picking players in a mock draft. So we're going to pick Arizona. We're going to turn on this thing called a second round Fanatic Challenge, and we're going to enter the draft. A second round Fanatic Challenge is 10 unique two-round drafts. This is a great way to implement a player board for a team. Okay, so you can see that there are some players here which look, really good for Arizona. I'm going to talk about some players we haven't spoke about in a little bit, just to make sure their names get mentioned. But one would be safety Malike Starks from Georgia, and observe he was 20th at the time I picked him. And then I want to talk about some second round edges. So if we look at the edge list for round two, Princely Umalela, and you can see he's 35th here in the player board. I'm going to pick him in round two for the Cardinals. Okay, so I've done one two-round draft. I've got 9 more to go. Okay, so you can see Starks went from 20th to 2 because I picked him in a mock draft. So Luther Burden's not going to be there very much. So because he's usually taken before pick 12. So I am going to take Luther Burden. Seeing Luther Burden and Marvin Harrison Jr. On the same team should be almost illegal. But I will do that in the mock draft. And then I will stick to the edge philosophy and mention Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M and observe he's 85th on the player board at the time that I picked him. Okay, at this point, I've done 2 of the 10 unique two-round mocks. What will make each of these mocks unique is my round 2 pick will have to be different. I'm also going to make all of my round 1 picks different, but that's not a requirement of the exercise. That's just what I plan to do so that I can talk about as many players as possible. Okay, so I do think the Cardinals need offensive line. So there's a couple of guys I want to talk about. So you can see like Josh Simmons. He's currently 125. I'm going to pick him in round 1. Okay. So is Josh Simmons a first-round tackle? We could ask ourselves the question, is there any first-round tackle in this year's draft? I think Simmons is going to be one of the 4 best tackles come draft day, and I think Simmons is going to be one of the 4 best tackles coming out of the class. But whether he's injured right now, so he may not even be able to test at the combine, and that may affect what round he's drafted in. Okay, so more edges to look at. Braden Swinson from LSU in round 2 to the Cardinals. And Swinson was about 138 on the board at the time that I picked him. Okay. Another offensive tackle. So you see Simmons has already moved up to 27th on the board. Okay. So another tackle to talk about. Wyatt Millam from West Virginia. So I'm going to pick Millam. He was 315 on the big board at the time that I picked him. And then let's look at the edge list again. Donovan Izaraku from Boston College. He's currently 143 on the board, picking him in round 2. At this point, I have completed 4 of the 10 unique mock drafts. I know that because it says iteration 4 right here, and it just started iteration 5. Okay, so more offensive tackles to talk about. Ariante Ursary from Minnesota to the Cardinals in round 1. Okay, and now I'm going to flip to some defensive linemen in round 2. And the defensive lineman in round 2 I want to talk about is Dante Corleone from Cincinnati. So Corleone's interesting because at one point he was taken off the draft board because he was not medically cleared to play this year. He had some blood clot issues. He has since been cleared to play, and he's coming back. And his film is great. So the biggest issue with Corleone is going to be, does he get medically cleared to play at the NFL level? Like, and when I say medically cleared, does his medicals check out at the combine? So another offensive tackle to talk about is Cam Williams from Texas. He's currently 143 on the board. I'm going to pick him in round 1. This is the 6th of 10 unique 2-round mocks that I'm doing. Okay, and let's look at some other defensive linemen. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. He's 54th on the board. I'm going to pick him in round 2. So Nolan's going to be somewhere in that player 20 to player 50 range. It really depends on what type of defensive lineman you want. He's not the biggest interior lineman. You're likely going to use him at a 3-tech or a 5-tech, not put him over the nose. So you can see Burden is sitting there at the top. Any other wide receivers worth mentioning? So Isaiah Bond, I think, should be higher than 28. So I'm going to go ahead and pick him in round 1. Okay. And then let's look at defensive linemen again in round 2. So Derek Harmon from Oregon, I would have right around player 40 to 60. So I'm going to pick him in round 2. He was player 117 at the time I picked him. Tacaria Davis, cornerback from Arizona, likely will have a first-round grade. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Tacaria Davis in round 1. This is the 8th of 10 unique 2-round mocks. And if they go corner in round 1, a round 2 offensive tackle would include Charles Grant from William and Mary. And if I don't have the Cardinals roster right and they don't need a tackle, could somebody mention that to me in the chat? I was confident when I was watching a Cardinals game earlier this year that I wasn't really impressed with their tackles. But maybe that was just the one game I was watching, and that may not be the actual circumstance. So you can see Davis moved up to 26 there, so that looks about right for him. Okay, another corner to talk about possibly in round 1, Jahdae Barron from Texas. And Barron could play boundary corner, slot corner. He could even move to safety. So there's some position flexibility. He's going to be somewhere in that player 20 to player 60 range, in my opinion. So whether you take him late first or you take him early in round 2, that's where I think he fits best. And then linebacker Barrett Carter in round 2. Observe he's 53rd on the player board. I have done 9 of the 10 unique 2-round drafts, which makes up the second round challenge. And this is me setting up the Cardinals player board. Okay. So you can see that Isaiah Bond moved pretty high up. You can also see like Abdul Carter's here. So I'm going to take Carter in round 1. He's 8th. I believe he's going to move up higher than Bond. Okay. And then Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama. He's currently 44th on the player board. I'll pick him here. Okay, so let's go over the different players that I talked about. Safety Malike Starks, round 1. Edge Princely Umalalen from Ole Miss in round 2. Round 1, wide receiver Luther Burden from Missouri. Round 2, edge Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Round 1, tackle Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Round 2, edge Braden Swinson from LSU. Round 1, tackle Wyatt Millen from West Virginia. Round 2, Donovan Iziraku, edge from Boston College. Ariante Ursary, round 1, offensive tackle from Minnesota. Round 2, Dante Corleone, defensive lineman from Cincinnati. Round 1, Cam Williams, offensive tackle from Texas. Round 2, Walter Nolan, defensive lineman from Ole Miss. Round 1, Isaiah Bond, wide receiver from Texas. Round 2, Derek Harmon, defensive lineman from Oregon. Round 1, Tacario Davis, cornerback from Arizona. Round 2, Charles Grant, offensive tackle from William & Mary. Round 1, Jahdae Barron, cornerback from Texas. Round 2, Barrett Carter, linebacker from Clemson. Round 1, Abdul Carter, linebacker from Penn State. Round 2, Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama. So the way to prove how an interactive mock draft simulator works and everything that we just did, if we go to the team needs section of the website and we find Arizona, and then we look at the player list, okay, you can see Travis Hunter's number 1, Abdul Carter's 2, Luther Burden's 3. You see Starks, then Graham, McMillan, Campbell. So some of those players we never picked. Isaiah Bond dropped to 9th. Okay. You see Cam Ward is there. I never picked him, but either because another user has, or I would just say more than likely at least one person has picked Cam Ward for Miami. That's how he is still up so high. And the next thing I want to do is let's look at the edges. So if you look, Umalalen moved up to 27. Shamar Stewart moved up to 34. Swinson, 37. Iziraku, 38. Jalot, 46. Okay? Those were all players I picked. They moved up to that spot of the player board. Okay? Basically moving them into the second round spot about where Arizona will be picking. Okay? There's a really good chance that a significant number of those edges will be off the board by the time that their second round pick happens. But whichever edge is left will be whichever one is highest on the board and has not been drafted is the one that would likely go to Arizona. Because I do believe that they need line help on both sides. And I know that I probably could do another one of those and focus on cornerback. But I don't want to make this episode too long. So my name is Jim, and this podcast is sponsored by NFL Draft Fanatics. It is the only interactive mock draft simulator. It is the only mock draft simulator with player boards that move like I just demonstrated. Every team has their own player board, which means that when you do a draft for the Arizona Cardinals, you're modifying the Cardinals player board, which is going to affect who the Cardinals take whenever any other user does a mock draft. Okay, it is designed that way to make mock drafting more random than any other simulator out there. Please like, follow, and subscribe this podcast channel. We have draft content on this channel every day. Earlier today, we talked about the Illinois-Michigan matchup. This episode, we talked about top 50 players in the draft. On Friday, we're doing a wide receiver cornerback position breakdown with about 14 players. I believe it's 8 wide receivers and 6 corners. So we're going to talk about like where they stack up on the board, what their player rankings are. I shouldn't say what their rankings are. Like, do we see him as a round 1 or a round 7 type player? So we're going to talk about like scouting reports on players starting on Friday. I believe it's 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So please like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. You can find us on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. Please comment on YouTube. Please submit questions on Twitter. We would be happy to create draft content if you have questions. We will create the content to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Jim. And remember, every day can be your draft day if you have the right attitude. Thank you very much. Enjoy your